Did someone just drill into my living room wall from the other side? That was the moment I froze, mid-bite, spoon dangling in the air, cereal forgotten, as a mechanical whir buzzed behind my bookshelf like a raccoon with a vendetta in a power tool rental. At first, I thought maybe it was a fluke. Old pipes, squirrels, haunted HVAC. But then it came again, louder, closer. It was coming from the wall that separated my duplex from my neighbor Karen's unit. And let me be clear, Karen is not the kind of woman who quietly minds her business. She's the type who called the HOA when I used warm white string lights instead of cool white for Christmas. The type who filed a complaint because my trash can was visible from the sidewalk for 30 whole minutes. She once suggested that my recycling bin's color disrupted the neighborhood's visual balance. So no, subtlety wasn't her strength. Still, the sound grew, and so did my suspicion. As a cybersecurity analyst who works from home, I'm intimately familiar with my network. I know when it lags, I know when it's overloaded, and I know when something or someone is stealing bandwidth. I'd noticed the slowdown a week earlier, laggy calls, delayed uploads, my encrypted backups stalling halfway through. I ran speed tests, diagnostics. Everything came back clean, which only made it worse. I knew my system was solid. That buzzing behind the wall? It wasn't random. It was the sound of my neighbor Karen declaring war on my Wi-Fi. And I was about to meet her declaration with an army of goat sounds and digital vengeance. Naturally, I did what any slightly paranoid, technologically inclined introvert would do. I deployed a fiber optic inspection cam. Tiny, flexible, designed for peeking into walls, usually to find leaks or lost jewelry, not uncover crimes against signal integrity. I slid the cam through a socket plate and twisted the lens. And there it was, nestled between the insulation and studs, was a small orange repeater box glowing with a green LED. An illegally installed splitter fed a snaking cable through freshly drilled drywall, drilled from her side. Karen had literally tunneled through our shared wall like she was in a prison escape movie, except instead of freedom, she was after free Wi-Fi. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. This wasn't just signal theft. This was trespass, property damage, a full-blown tech heist. She bypassed the router, the rules, and reality. And she did it with the confidence of someone who once tried to submit a bylaw to the HOA that outlawed inflatable lawn decorations larger than 12 inches. This wasn't about internet speed. This was about control. She saw my strong Wi-Fi signal as a threat to her perceived dominance over the cul-de-sac. I pulled the inspection cam back slowly, heart racing. This wasn't a confrontation that called for shouting or legal letters. No, this called for finesse, strategy, creativity. Because if she thought she could just drill into my life and get away with it, she had no idea what I was capable of. It took me 2 days to build it. I called it GOAT Protocol, not because it was the greatest of all time, though it was, but because it featured a weaponized GOAT soundboard and a customized signal blocker disguised inside a dead repeater box. The box looked just like the one she installed, but inside I'd embedded a low-frequency RF jammer paired with a microcontroller. Every time her devices tried to access the stolen signal, the jammer would activate, and more importantly, it would trigger a speaker to emit a randomized goat bleat, sometimes short, sometimes long, always loud enough to be heard through the wall. At first, it was a quiet bah, then a drawn-out bleat hack that echoed like a livestock alarm from the underworld. I even set up a redirect on her hijacked signal. Instead of getting access to Netflix or Facebook, she'd be sent to a static web page. One black screen, one screaming goat, one message: "You shall not bleat." The next morning at precisely 8:37 a.m. she got her first taste. I heard her scream. It wasn't fear. It was confusion wrapped in outrage. What is that noise? I sat at my desk with coffee in hand, streaming 4K wildlife documentaries without a hiccup in connection. The Wi-Fi was buttery smooth, like justice. A few minutes later, she banged on my door with all the fury of a suburban dictator denied her kingdom. "You're doing something," she yelled. "There's a sound in the wall." I gave her my best innocent smile. "A sound? What kind of sound?" She narrowed her eyes. "It sounds like a goat." I gasped. You don't think there's a goat in the wall, do you? She didn't laugh. I did. Then I closed the door slowly. Let the bleeding begin. By noon, the goat sounds had played 5 times, each one slightly different, some short and panicked, others deep and long like an opera singer in mid-meltdown. Each time, Karen's reaction escalated. She stomped. She screamed. At one point, I watched her out the window, pacing her front yard with a handheld EMF detector, spinning in circles like she was searching for spirits, or signals, or goats. Her next move was a handwritten note taped to my door that read, "Stop using illegal frequencies to communicate with barnyard animals." I framed it. By day 2, she stopped sleeping. Lights in her house stayed on all night. She started whispering to the wall. She told other neighbors she thought the house was haunted by a farm spirit. One lady on our block asked if she was watching too much Yellowstone. Karen didn't appreciate that. But the goat noises weren't the only part of the plan. Every time she tried to access the internet on her tablet or smart TV, it redirected her to that same static page with the looped goat video. Bleeding, staring, judging. And the cherry on top? Her connection only failed when she tried to stream her conspiracy theory podcasts, the ones about fluoride, satellites, and birds being government drones. By the end of the week, Karen was a wreck. The bleeding didn't just haunt her devices, it haunted her psyche. She blamed the HOA, she blamed the power company, she blamed the liberal media and solar panels. She even filed a formal noise complaint with the city about phantom ungulates, but deep down, I think she knew. She poked the wrong goat, and this was just the beginning. It didn't take long before the HOA came knocking. Figuratively, of course. They'd never do anything as efficient as actual door knocking. Instead, I received a trifold letter, laminated and zip-tied to my doorknob like a passive-aggressive Christmas ornament. The letter accused me of unapproved audio emissions, auditory interference inconsistent with community standards, and my personal favorite, livestock-steamed harassment. Apparently, Karen had filed a formal complaint with the HOA claiming I was weaponizing goat sounds to torment her and destabilize the peaceful auditory environment of the cul-de-sac. To be fair, the HOA has never been particularly sharp. These are the same people who once tried to fine a neighbor for painting her front door emotionally aggressive red. But still, this was a new level. They were treating goat bleats like sonic warfare. Karen claimed the sounds were causing her stress, sleep loss, and, according to her letter, residual psychic dissonance. She even claimed the frequencies were interfering with her smart fridge and warping her yogurt settings. She policed bandwidth like it was a hedge, I muttered to myself, clipped it, trimmed it, and filed complaints if it leaned a little too far toward freedom. But she had underestimated something important. I don't go to war with roars, I go to war with receipts. And I had plenty. Within 48 hours, I had assembled what I proudly dubbed the Karen Kit, 3 USB drives labeled A, B, and Bleat. Inside were infrared footage of her drill boring through the shared wall, footage of her plugging in a repeater box to hijack my signal, audio logs from my redirect server, and yes, a video of her pacing with a RF meter while muttering about interdimensional goat sounds. Each file was neatly time-stamped, labeled, and paired with my network diagnostics and logs, showing sudden drops in bandwidth that corresponded exactly to her devices connecting. I printed out a cover letter that began, "Dear HOA Board, please find attached visual and digital documentation of Karen Hollowell's wall-based network intrusion and the resulting goat-themed countermeasure, which has been applied with precision and a surprising amount of restraint." I also included a short technical summary for the less tech-savvy members of the board, using simple phrases like, "She drilled through a wall and stole my Wi-Fi," and "This is her committing a misdemeanor on camera." I slid the package into the HOA's locked Dropbox with the kind of satisfaction usually reserved for revenge movies or home renovation reveals. Because some battles are won with bites, not fists. The next HOA meeting was already scheduled for that week, and while I normally avoid these like expired shrimp cocktail, this one was too juicy to skip. I showed up 5 minutes early with popcorn in hand. The moment Karen walked in, I knew something was about to explode. She had that look, like she was holding together with equal parts duct tape and denial. She stormed to the front of the room, slapped a stack of paper onto the table, and launched into a tirade that will go down in suburban history. "This is domestic audio terrorism," she shouted. "This is psychological warfare using barn animals." She pointed directly at me. "He built a weapon of sound, of digital trickery. Every time I try to connect, a goat screams at me, 'I can't sleep, I can't stream, I can't live.'" Behind her, someone had set up a whiteboard titled "The Bleeding." On it were doodles of goats, sound waves, and what appeared to be a hand-drawn map of my living room. I could barely breathe from laughing. A neighbor raised their hand and asked, "Didn't you drill through his wall?" Karen waved the question away like it was smoke. "Irrelevant." The board just stared. One member whispered, "Is this the guy with the USBs?" Another nodded solemnly. When they said they'd take the matter under review, Karen shrieked, "It's already under review, by the goat!" That was the moment I realized she'd gone full Karen. There's no going back. 2 days later, I witnessed something that felt ripped straight from a bad sitcom. Karen, clearly unsatisfied with the HOA's lack of instant goat-based justice, had called in an expert, by which I mean a tech guy she found on Craigslist. He arrived wearing a hoodie 3 sizes too small and a backpack that rattled with every step. He spent 20 minutes wandering around her lawn, holding what looked like a modified toaster. Occasionally it beeped. He nodded like he understood something cosmic. Then he asked to check her attic. From my porch, I watched the whole saga unfold like a live-action conspiracy podcast. After 20 minutes, the guy came stumbling out of her front door, pale as chalk, muttering, "Nope, not worth it, not for this. I don't do cursed frequencies." Karen ran after him with a $20 0-cents bill, screaming, "Can you at least triangulate the source?" He refused. He actually ran down the street, dropping a pair of safety goggles behind him like breadcrumbs. One neighbor later said it was like watching Ghostbusters meet Craigslist. The best part, after he left, Karen stood in her driveway, RF meter in one hand, a Walkman in the other, and started yelling at the sky. Meanwhile, I streamed 3 hours of flawless internet, goat-free. I didn't even have to bleat that day. She was doing it to herself. It was just past midnight when I heard the knock. Not the polite kind. No, this one had the urgency of a sitcom cop who's tired of reruns. I opened the door to find a uniformed officer, flashlight in one hand, clipboard in the other, and an expression that screamed, "Please don't make this weirder than it already is." "Good evening, sir," he began. "We received a noise complaint, something about goats?" I didn't even blink. "Of course you did. Come in." He stepped into the living room, eyes scanning. No goats, no livestock, no hay bales or sacrificial altars. Just a normal home, fast Wi-Fi, and the faint aroma of leftover coffee. "She says you've been weaponizing animal noises," the officer said, half apologetic, half intrigued. "Any truth to that?" I showed him the footage. Karen's repeater box, the drill through the wall, the jerry-rigged tech theft. I even pulled up the redirect logs. He chuckled. "So let me get this straight. She stole your internet, you blocked her, and now she's accusing you of goat-based psychological warfare?" I nodded. He exhaled slowly, clearly resisting the urge to laugh. "Well," he said finally, "ma'am, he's not raising goats. He's raising the bar." He left with a copy of the footage, a promise to file a report, and a muttered, "I've seen a lot, but this is new." I made a mental note. The local PD was now aware. The bleats were officially documented, and Karen was running out of allies. By now, Karen's paranoia wasn't just escalating, it was accelerating. Every time she tried to connect to the network she'd stolen, she hit a wall of perfectly tailored digital vengeance. Her screen lit up with "Goat Alert Initiated" in bold flashing red. A countdown began. 5, 4, 3. A distorted goat laugh echoed from her device's speakers, followed by a looped video of a goat in sunglasses chewing grass and bleeding in slow motion. The redirect page I'd created was simple. One HTML file, a CS animation, and an embedded video loop titled Operation Bleetstorm. It was elegant chaos, and the beauty? The sequence only triggered when her devices connected. It wouldn't touch anyone else on the network. Karen's paranoia was now programmed. She couldn't show anyone without sounding unhinged. And if she did, I had logs to prove her connection was unauthorized. She started knocking on neighbor doors again, waving her iPad like it was a cry for help. "This is what happens when I go online," she'd cry. Most responded with, "Maybe use your own Wi-Fi." She tried to print out the Goat Alert screen and bring it to the HOA as evidence of cyberbullying. Someone leaked the image. It ended up on a subreddit called Digital Justice League. The post title? Karen Gets Bleated into Oblivion. Every login attempt she made now triggered goat noises. Every second she spent connected was a fresh reminder that tech pettiness, when done legally, is an art form. I thought the climax had passed, that we'd reached peak absurdity. Then the black SUV rolled up. It was unmarked, matte finish, windows tinted like a conspiracy theory. A man in a gray suit stepped out with the calm, silent confidence of someone who didn't need backup because he was the backup. He walked to Karen's door, knocked once. She answered in a bathrobe in confusion. The moment she saw the badge clipped to his belt, her face drained like a basement during flood season. You see, Karen's little repeater box wasn't just hijacking my Wi-Fi. Her DIY wiring had been sending errant signals that bled into emergency radio channels, ones used by local EMTs, police dispatch, the same frequencies tagged for life-saving communication. The FCC had tracked multiple interference reports back to a single address. Inside her walls, with her half-baked, badly insulated equipment, Karen had unknowingly jammed emergency response signals every time she tried to stream her HOA conspiracy documentaries. And now she was under federal investigation. The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He handed her a form, began logging equipment, and made a call. Moments later, 2 more agents arrived with small metal cases and a handheld scanner. Karen stood frozen as they scanned her property, logged frequencies, and quietly gathered evidence. She tried to argue. "It was his signal. He hacked me with goats." The agent just blinked. "Ma'am, you tampered with federal bandwidth. We're not here for goats. We're here because you might have endangered lives." She said nothing after that. After the SUVs left, the block went still. Karen's lights stayed off for 2 days, her blinds drawn like battle scars. She didn't pace the driveway. She didn't shout at sprinklers. She didn't even tape up her usual Monday HOA flyers about improper mulch thickness. It was eerie. The HOA had fallen silent. That meant plotting. The neighbors whispered. Was she moving? Being charged? Starting a militia? One guy claimed he saw her shredding documents through the window. Another swore she'd mailed herself an envelope labeled Legal Retaliation Plan. I knew better. She was regrouping. People like Karen don't quit. They mutate. I kept my defenses live, updated the redirect script, and added a motion-activated recorder behind the wall just in case she tried another late-night drill operation. But she didn't. She stayed silent. Too silent. And that, my friends, is how you know the final act is coming. It didn't take long for the HOA to realize they'd hitched their wagon to a gremlin with a clipboard. Within 48 hours of the FCC visit, a quiet HOA memo circulated the block. No letterhead, no signatures, just a plain statement in 12-point Times New Roman. The HOA does not condone or support any illegal interference with personal or federal property. All residents are encouraged to respect property boundaries, bandwidth integrity, and neighborhood harmony. Translation, we're not with Karen. By the end of the week, Karen had been formally cited by the HOA for multiple violations: structural tampering, unpermitted signal extension, and community disruption bordering on hysteria. The irony was divine. Neighbors, once silent under her rain of citations and side-eyes, suddenly found their voices. Pete from across the street baked muffins and dropped them at my door with a post-it, "You're the real signal boost we needed." Another neighbor, Susan, handed me a framed sketch of a goat holding an Ethernet cable. "For the wall," she said. Karen's HOA empire collapsed like a soggy clipboard in a sprinkler. No one defended her, no one spoke up. In the same meetings she once ruled like a petty queen, she now sat alone, hair frazzled, eyes twitchy, radio wave detector clutched, like a comfort animal. The HOA meetings became quieter, calmer, even enjoyable. Someone brought chili, someone else brought wine, nobody brought lawsuits. Desperate and cornered, Karen called for a virtual emergency HOA tribunal on Zoom. Only 4 people showed up. 2 were muted, 1 left halfway through to refill his wine. That left Karen and her headset mic, centered in front of a whiteboard labeled "The Bleatening." Her presentation began with a dramatic sigh and the phrase, "What I am about to reveal is not for the faint of bandwidth." She claimed I had launched a sustained campaign of sonic terrorism involving goat noises, subliminal messages, and electromagnetic stress beams. She cited frequencies that rearranged her sleep patterns and oral interference consistent with domestic psychops. She pulled out a diagram, clearly sketched with crayon, that showed a goat, a satellite dish, and what looked like a mood ring. At one point she said, the bleats caused lower lumbar misalignment and irreparable chakra damage. Then she produced a medical note from her chiropractor stating she was suffering from bleat-streamer back spasms. The HOA board listened in stunned silence. Nobody blinked. One person turned off their camera, probably to laugh. Karen's grand finale was a PDF titled Cyber Pasture Warfare, a goat-based threat to civilized living. It froze midway through the screen share and she spent the next 6 minutes trying to unmute her own slideshow. She ended with a quote she attributed to Benjamin Franklin: "Those who sacrifice stable Wi-Fi for brief peace deserve neither." He did not say that. The HOA president cleared his throat and said, "We'll take your statements under advisement." Karen nodded like she just addressed Congress. Meanwhile, someone changed the meeting title to Goats, Grudges, and Gigabytes. When the Zoom trial didn't go her way, Karen shifted to Plan B, court. She filed a civil suit for psychic harm, sonic abuse, and emotional interference via livestock audio. The paperwork was delivered in a manila envelope with her name handwritten in bubble letters. Her cease and desist letter was in Comic Sans. On the back was a sticker of a goat, scratched out with red pen. My lawyer, a man who's handled actual cybercrime cases involving Bitcoin laundering and state-level data leaks, read the complaint and simply said, "Oh, this'll be fun." We prepared a compact defense. Video of Karen drilling into the wall, infrared footage of the stolen repeater, redirect page logs with timestamp, a statement from the local police officer who had personally heard Karen's screams, and, for good measure, the FCC's interference citation. Court day arrived. Karen entered the municipal courtroom carrying a stack of papers and wearing a neck brace. When asked why, she said, "The bleats have altered my spine." Her arguments ranged from the absurd to the metaphysical. She claimed the goat sounds haunted her sleep, ruined her social standing, and at one point caused her tablet to burst into flames. There was no evidence of this. When it was my turn, I played the footage. Silence. Even the judge chuckled. This case, he said, is not only dismissed with prejudice, but may be the first trial in history to cite intentional goat mimicry as a complaint. Outside the courtroom, Karen shoved a packet of memes into the trash can and stormed off. I thought that was the end. But the internet had other plans. One of the courtroom spectators had uploaded a video recap to Reddit. Within hours, Bleatgate was trending. Someone created a Twitter account called The Goat That Saved the Bandwidth. Another launched a meme page featuring my redirect screen captioned, "You shall not bleat." A parody TikTok showed a man in a hoodie drilling into a wall, getting hit with a bleat and collapsing in digital agony. Fan art followed, stickers, even t-shirts. One shirt read, "Bleat me once, shame on you." Another, "Sonic Justice, powered by Goat." The tech subreddit exploded with breakdowns of my setup. They called it clean retaliation, the most lawful, pettiest prank ever executed, and cybersecurity meets barnyard ballet. I received messages from HOA survivors across the country. One guy from Arizona wrote, "You gave me hope. I've been fined for sunflowers." A woman in Florida sent a video of her installing a stuffed goat near her router for protection, she said. Even my own neighborhood shifted. Kids laughed when they saw me. Teens walked by and made goat noises in solidarity. Someone put a mini metal plaque outside my house. Home of the bleat. Wi-Fi protected by satirical livestock. Karen, meanwhile, vanished from the digital world. Her Facebook deactivated, her emails bounced back. The war was over, and somehow justice had been served with a goat-shaped stamp. When you think the saga has finally ended, when peace finally settles in like fog after a storm, Karen finds a loophole. This time she filed in small claims court, stripping away the federal interference and FCC citations like they never existed. The new complaint? Digital ambiance warfare. Yes, that was the phrase printed on official court documents. According to her handwritten complaint, with 7 underlines and a small doodle of a goat crossed out in red, I had manipulated ambient space with audio mischief and technological intent to distress. She claimed emotional hardship, social sabotage, and loss of spiritual alignment due to sonic subversion. I wish I were joking. The day of court, she arrived wearing a scarf with sheep on it, possibly in protest, and carrying a 3-ring binder so thick it looked like she mugged a public library. Inside were 84 pages of evidence, including goat memes, a Yelp review from someone complaining about mysterious animal sounds, a screenshot of a Reddit post titled "Karen Got Bleated." The judge, same one from the earlier fiasco, looked like he'd aged 10 years the moment she entered. "Ms. Hollowell," he sighed, "again?" She dove in. A full 15-minute monologue about sonic targeting, cyber-stalking, neighborhood collusion, and how my house was an acoustically weaponized barn. When it was my turn, I handed the judge a USB drive labeled fax. He nodded. Within 5 minutes, case dismissed. Again, as we left, Karen shouted, "This isn't over!" The judge didn't look up. It is now. If Karen thought suing me was going to silence the saga, she didn't anticipate the YouTube effect. 2 days after the courtroom fiasco, I got an email from a channel called Viral Justice. They hosted weekly breakdowns of bizarre small claims disputes and civil cases. Their audience? Millions. Their style? Equal parts legal education and viral entertainment. They invited me to do a segment called Goatgate, the Rise and Bleat of a Neighborhood Tyrant. I hesitated until they said, "We'll animate the goat." The interview was filmed in a cozy studio with a microphone that looked suspiciously like a judge's gavel. They asked everything. How I discovered the repeater, how I built the bleat box, why I chose a goat. I answered simply, because no one expects the goat. The episode dropped on a Friday. By Sunday night, it had 3.4 million views. The comments poured in. "This is the cybersecurity Batman we didn't know we needed." Heady, precise, perfect. She drilled through his wall and got bleated into internet history. Fan art exploded. One creator made a digital short where a cartoon Karen gets chased by goat-shaped drones. Another designed a t-shirt that read, "Digital Ambiance Warrior, *Goatgate 2024. They turned her rage into a keynote and me into a meme, but the kind people root for. And Karen? She posted a blurry selfie with a caption, "Don't believe the goat lies." It was deleted within an hour. Karen's final legal collapse triggered a tidal wave of cleanup inside the HOA. The remaining board members, half of whom had once co-signed her crusades, began resigning in waves. Their resignation notes ranged from formal to comical. One simply read, "I never signed off on the goats." At the next neighborhood meeting, Pete, the neighbor who once dropped off muffins and moral support, was unanimously elected HOA president. His first act? Burn the old HOA rulebook in a fire pit behind the clubhouse. The flames danced high as residents tossed in outdated citations. One neighbor threw in a violation about their flag being too flappy. Another, a ticket for wind chimes deemed too whimsical. A third, Karen's infamous complaint about chalk drawings being visual pollutants. Then came Pete's second act, no more nonsense bylaw. It was simple, one line. If you wouldn't say it to your grandma, don't write it into policy. Applause, laughter, relief. People brought lawn chairs and s'mores. Kids drew goats in sidewalk chalk with wild abandon. For the first time, the neighborhood felt like a community again. Karen didn't show. Her windows stayed dark, but no one missed her. They were too busy smiling. The following week, a small box arrived at my front door. No return address. Just a sticker of a goat wearing sunglasses and holding a router. Inside was a plush goat, no bigger than a shoebox, with a speaker sewn into its belly. When you squeezed it, it screamed a glorious, digitized bleat. Also inside, a handwritten thank you card, a screenshot of the Goat Alert initiated redirect page. In a note, for services rendered, long may you bleat. The internet, I placed it on the shelf next to my framed FCC citation, and the courtroom drawing someone had made of Karen yelling, "You weaponize livestock." Neighbors started calling me the Goat Father. One kid spray-painted a mural of a goat on the neighborhood sidewalk with the phrase, "Bleat happens." A few days later, I spotted someone jogging in a t-shirt that read, "Embrace the bleat." Karen had tried to control the narrative, but now she was the narrative, and I had become a symbol, not of revenge but of resilience, because I didn't fight fire with fire, I fought noise with nuance, ridiculous with reason, and entitlement with a goat. Just when we thought the bleating had finally quieted, Karen struck again, this time in paper form. One morning, every mailbox on the block bore a new offering, a glossy, trifold pamphlet titled "Restoring Order, a Citizen's Call to Digital Decency." Inside, a sea of bold fonts, clip art goats, and charts that looked like they'd been designed by someone arguing with Excel. She accused me of conducting psyops on civilian soil, blamed local Wi-Fi blackouts on my experimental noise nodes, and even suggested I was part of a fringe group known as the Wireless Illuminati. The real highlight? A full-page timeline that began with the first bleed and ended with neighborhood collapse, present day. She distributed these flyers like she was launching a presidential campaign against logic. Neighbors didn't even blink. One used it to line her birdcage. Another folded it into an origami goat. By lunch, the recycling bins were full of folded Karenisms. Someone compared the design to a cult brochure made by PowerPoint after 3 Red Bulls. They weren't wrong. It was the last grasp of control from someone who had lost all grip on reality, and the neighborhood knew it. If Karen's leaflets were her final sermon, the internet responded with its own scripture, memes. The digital world had already chewed up her saga and spit it back out as comedy gold, but now it elevated it to legend. A TikTok user created a mini-doc called Blitter of the Cul-de-sac, complete with dramatic voiceovers, reenactments, and slow-mo zooms of Karen's courtroom neck brace. It hit 1.2 million views in 3 days. Reddit threads exploded with fan theories, remixes of the goat sounds, and AI-generated images of Karen as a goat exorcist, a medieval town crier, and, most disturbingly, a villain in a live-action Dora reboot titled Karen and the Forbidden Router. My inbox filled with digital art submissions. One depicted me riding a battle goat across a suburban battlefield with the caption, "Fighting HOA with bleat force." The internet had chosen its side. And Karen? She became a case study in how not to weaponize paranoia. One legal blogger wrote, "She became a lesson in what not to do with a router and a grudge." The mockery wasn't cruel, it was cathartic. Because when someone drills into your wall and sues you for go-based psychological warfare, sometimes the only justice is viral humility. It didn't end in court, it ended in committee. Following the FCC's investigation, Karen was officially cited for unauthorized access to protected frequencies, interfering with emergency services channels, and signal piracy within a residential zone. Her fines were steep, her options limited. But the real reckoning came at the HOA's final emergency vote. In a packed community center with standing room only, the motion was simple: dissolve the HOA, dissolve the drama, dissolve the dictatorship Karen had used to launch her reign of citations, passive aggression, and porch surveillance. It passed unanimously. Even Karen's old supporters didn't raise a hand. A local attorney present said afterward, "I've never seen a homeowners association self-destruct with this much dignity and snacks." Pete, the new community rep, made it official. He stood on stage holding the now useless HOA rulebook and said, "From now on, this neighborhood runs on kindness, common sense, and casserole." The HOA was now officially Karen-proof, and the bylaws shredded, replaced by a fridge magnet that read, "Don't be a jerk," with Karen out and the HOA dissolved. Something amazing happened. The neighborhood woke up. Kids started drawing goats on the sidewalk again. People smiled more. One neighbor even built a little wooden lawn statue of a goat holding a sign that read, "The internet is strong here." My goat plush sat proudly in my window, waving to the street. People dropped off cookies. One neighbor left a USB stick filled with remixed Bleat soundtracks titled Karen's Greatest Misses. Then came the potluck, the first official community event since the collapse. No rules, no HOA forms, just burgers, brownies, and laughter. We set up folding tables and played music. Someone brought a karaoke machine, and yes, someone sang a version of Old MacDonald that went, "And on this street he had a goat with a bleat bleat here." It was magic, not because of the memes or the fallout, but because for the first time we were a neighborhood again. Not hostages, not case studies, just people who lived near each other. And the thing that brought us back together wasn't a court, wasn't a council, it was a barbecue. Because as it turns out, barbecue solved more problems than bylaws ever did. Just when the air had cleared and the last goat meme faded from the neighborhood group chat, Karen made her final move. Or, as we now call it, the last bleat. It started, predictably, with flyers. Freshly printed, overglossed, and zip-tied to every fence, mailbox, and community notice pole. Title, Reinstating Order, New Guidelines for Neighborhood Decency. Inside, pure Karen. Rules like, no animal-based theming in any decor, digital or otherwise. Auditory weaponry shall be banned, including bleats, moos, or any farm direct disrupt. All electronic devices must be disclosed to the HOA registry upon installation. She was trying to reboot her HOA empire, except the HOA no longer existed. The rest of us treated it like a parody. One neighbor laminated the flyer and displayed it on his lawn with a caption, "In loving memory of Karen's authority." Another hung theirs on the community bulletin board with a goat sticker that read, "Nice try." Karen wasn't reclaiming power. She was reenacting a fantasy, and nobody bought a ticket to the show. The Wi-Fi goat was now neighborhood legend. Karen, unfortunately, was now its punchline. Not content with flyers alone, Karen summoned her final legal fury. She filed one last suit in small claims court, this time accusing me of inducing audio hallucinations via subliminal goat hypnosis. Yes, goat hypnosis. She walked into the courtroom with a binder so large it needed its own chair. Inside were blurry screenshots of the Goat Alert screen, transcripts from our HOA group chat, and a hand-drawn illustration of a goat with spirals for eyes. Her opening argument was that the repetitive goat noises embedded with subliminal triggers had caused irreversible behavioral shifts and metaphysical fatigue. I wasn't sure if I needed a defense or a translator. The judge, clearly exhausted from existence, raised a brow and asked gently, "Are you claiming you were cursed by a goat-themed website?" Karen nodded with conviction. "Yes, Your Honor, I believe he used digital bleats to erode my mental sovereignty." The judge stared at her like he had just witnessed a philosophical car crash. He sighed and said, "Case dismissed. Please do not return with animal-themed conspiracies." Karen tried to protest, but her voice faded under the gavel's tap. It wasn't justice, it was mercy. 3 weeks after her final courtroom comedy, a moving truck pulled into Karen's driveway. No announcement, no going away party, Just boxes, silence, and a woman in sunglasses staring at her own front door like it had betrayed her. Rumor was the foreclosure came swift. Federal fines had stacked up. HOA restitution demands resurfaced. And the FCC wasn't done with her. She tried to sell, but word travels fast, especially when your address is known as the epicenter of a goat cyber sting. She didn't scream this time. Didn't rally neighbors. Didn't even glare when I waved from my porch. She packed quietly like a campfire that never really lit, a fizzled match trying to pretend it was a flame. Her last trip down the driveway was a moment of strange stillness. She looked back at her old house, then at mine. For a second I thought she might shout something, one final bleat of delusion. But she didn't. She just got in the car, closed the door, and vanished. Karen left like a firework dud. All spark, no echo. 2 months after Karen's exit, a young couple moved in. Friendly, quiet, no HOA ambitions. They brought cookies, asked for local restaurant tips, and laughed when someone called my place the Goat House. A few days later, a small package appeared on my porch. Inside, a soft, plush goat with sunglasses. Taped to its horn was a note. Thanks for the legend, looking forward to living next to Goat HQ. I laughed for a full minute. I placed the goat plush on my porch chair. Next to it I hung a small wooden sign. Goat signal active. Now when neighbors pass by, they smile, some salute, others just shake their heads with a chuckle. New families ask, "What's the story behind the goat?" I always reply, "It's in the bleach." Because in a world of firewalls and flyers, of routers and ridiculousness, sometimes the best firewall is a goat. In the end, Karen didn't lose because someone out-yowled her. She lost because someone stayed calm, documented everything, and let her hang herself with her own Wi-Fi cable. The bleeds were just the distraction. The real power was in the receipts. Because when someone drills into your wall to hijack your signal and accuses you of psychological goat warfare, you don't argue, you organize. You don't escalate, you elevate. Facts don't scream, they hum with power. Every screenshot, every log file, every timestamp was a quiet brick in the fortress of justice. And when it was time to bring the noise, legally, publicly, perfectly, it all clicked into place. Not because of rage, but because of strategy. It's tempting to shout back when someone shouts at you. But shouting is short-term. Proof is permanent. In a world full of Karens, sometimes your best weapon is silence. Laced with documentation, drama is its own genre of madness, and every street has at least one clipboard commando who believes they were divinely chosen to enforce flagpole placement and garden gnome regulations. So how do you fight back? You don't throw punches. You throw policy. First, know your laws. City ordinances, zoning codes, your HOA charter, these are your shields. Second, log everything. Screenshots, video clips, audio recordings. Don't argue at the mailbox when you can testify in the courtroom. Third, keep calm on camera. Let them rant, let them wave their laminated bylaws like gospel. You just stand there with your folder of truth. Metaphor, paper trails are predator repellents. Fourth, leverage tech. Hidden TAMs, network logs, secure routers. Today's HOA villain might scream about personal freedom while standing on your lawn with a signal sniffer. Don't engage with the drama. Engage with the documentation. Let them collapse under the weight of their own nonsense. This story wasn't just about goats, routers, or federal agents. It was about the difference between community and control. The best neighborhoods aren't run by fear. They're built on friendship. Karen thought leadership meant domination. But real neighbors know it means walking over a casserole, offering help, and waving when it's inconvenient. Connection beats control. Muffins beat mandates. A healthy block doesn't need HOA patrols in golf carts. It needs porch lights that stay on past 9 p.m., shared Wi-Fi when storms hit, and forgiveness when someone's kid mows a line too wide. You don't need to start a war to keep your street peaceful. You just need to show up as someone who gives more than they gripe. A good neighbor lends sugar, not subpoenas. That's how you make a place worth living in. Not by writing new rules, but by rewriting the story people tell about where they live. And now, if you've made it this far, you know. You don't have to raise your voice to raise the bar. So here's what you can do. Drop your HOA horror story in the comments. Whether it's about lawn signs, flag bans, or the time someone fined you for planting the wrong shade of tulips, we want to hear it. Your story might be the next voiceover we bring to life. Subscribe for more tales of neighborhood nonsense, tactical takedowns, and unexpected suburban justice. Like this video if you've ever been fined for something so absurd it made you laugh after it made you angry. Because at the end of the day, Karen didn't get taken down by shouting. She got taken down by someone with receipts, a calm voice, and a perfectly timed goat bleat. Final metaphor. Not all heroes wear capes. Some install goat jammers. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you hear strange bleating through your wall, it might just be justice calling back.